first, they had a hard time believing we were just two dudes out on a walk in the Middle East. But we just stuck to it. We had our history, we had our training, and many of them knew of T.E. Lawrence. And so we would get over it that way. There was this, Lawrence, right? And so that, like helped. Um, and the last thing I'll add to that was by far the toughest and worst border crossing we experienced was the Kingdom Bridge between Jordan and Israel.
Mm-hmm. That makes
Two Americans on the other side of the Jordan River for just short of a month in backpacks, walking over together with a busload of Palestinians to cross the King Hussein Bridge. Like, tell me again what you're doing here. Where have you? What did you see in Saudi Arabia? We saw friends.
Welcome to Beyond This Week, the guest-focused series from This Week Explained, where we dive into the lives and stories of fascinating individuals shaping our understanding of the world. On this episode, Kervin sits down with Miles Spencer, an adventurer, entrepreneur, and author of A Line in the Sand. Miles's life has been a whirlwind of creativity and exploration, inspired by the legendary T.E. Lawrence and driven by a deep curiosity about the world. His journey has taken him from Pittsburgh to the Middle East, where the events of 9/11 sparked a quest to understand the region's complex history and culture. Through high-stakes adventures and personal encounters, Miles shares how preparation, storytelling, and even cutting-edge technology helped him navigate some of the world's most volatile regions. This conversation goes beyond borders, offering insights into the nuanced narratives that define the Middle East and the lessons Miles learned along the way. We'll also hear about his latest venture, Relay, a video-based app designed to revolutionize how you discover and share movies and TV shows. We also get a sneak peek at his upcoming sequel, Havana Familia, where Miles details his trek through Cuba. So, join us as we explore Miles Spencer's endless pursuit of curiosity, connection, and understanding in this episode of Beyond This Week.
All right. Welcome, Miles Spencer, to the podcast. Miles, how are you doing?
Hey, Kervin, I'm doing great. Thank you for having me on and allowing me to address your listeners.
Yeah, I think they're going to be very excited for this episode because you just have such a wealth of experience over the years through many different things. And because of that, I want to let you take a few minutes to introduce who you are, what you've done in the past, what you're doing now, and just let people know about your work.
Sure, Kervin, thank you. I'll start off with, I'm just a curious guy from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So grew up 14 years there, perhaps Midwestern work ethic, certainly an active lifestyle with sports and the rest. And, but I always was bugging my parents, my grandparents, everybody around us with who, what, where, why, where, when, right? Just this curiosity for how things work, whether people would do that again, why they did it. And came to the East Coast. I was fortunate enough to go to a boarding school that rewarded me for my sports, I'm not going to say prowess, but interests. And that really opened up a big world to me, like international travel, languages, and the study of history. I'm not a historian, but I've always loved history, and I use storytelling to tell history that I think is relevant. And that's how we came upon the story in the Middle East. So, yes, my day job is an entrepreneur. I've created 10,000 jobs through companies that I've started. The good benefit of exiting 3 of those, which comes with a caveat. That means I also failed 30 times trying to get to those 3 that have. That just comes with the territory. Everybody wants to talk about the 3. I remind people about the 30 that it takes to get there. Got a couple of nutty kids, 11 and 13, that think they own the house, have different opinions. And I run a digital media and entertainment business called Relay that helps people movies,
it's really about what to watch and why to watch it rather than where to watch it. That's a big problem. And in the world today, the biggest problem, but a big problem, is the 22 minutes one spends. So we think we have a technology solution for that. In my spare time, I paint watercolors and make sourdough bread. I cook. Obviously, I write from time to time. And that's allowed me to, again, share some of the experience.
Yeah, it's
See,
a fascinating background because it kind of resonates with me when you talk about how your life and your career led you to travel a lot, and that traveling led you to understand history and not a historian. I was a brief semester in college. I was a history major. That's what I thought I was going to do, is be an historian, and the Army had a different view on that. They said, you're going to learn history a different way, and that's by going to different countries. And was also able to go to the Defense Language Institute to learn Arabic, which part of that is an education in culture and history of the Middle East. And so that's why your book is so fascinating to me, because it's basically a history lesson of the Middle East. It's like Lawrence of Arabia, right? This history lesson. And the book is called A Line in the Sand, correct?
that is it.
Yep. And so why A Line in the Sand? What was the beginning of the thought process behind that book?
Well, really, Kirby, it started after 9/11. Again, I live in Metro New York. Great tragedy that happened. 1,000 folks died on that day. Many thousands died since. A lot of families affected. But again, back to who, what, why, where, when. I just could not get my arms around what these folks were thinking, how they did it. Aside from the factual part of it, we keep going back to I like it, three whys, right? Okay, yes, there's the explanation, but why? And I just didn't get what I needed. Reading a lot. And I came upon one book, Seven Pillars of Wisdom by T.E. Lawrence. Actually, technically, I read John Mack's psych profile before. It's called The Prince of Our Disorder, because I had to understand Lawrence's psych before I could ever understand what Lawrence wrote. It was a good thing I did. I read 27 articles, actually, a quick piece that he wrote in 1916, and that was very helpful. But I was just finishing Seven Pillars, and a very good friend who was going through counseling, Wells Jones. He's a Navy Special Forces ex-parachute rescue specialist, retired. And so he's got some chops. And we're like, hey, are you getting your hands around any of this? He's like, well, I'm reading the book. Which one? It's Seven Pillars. So just finished. What do you think? So, well, he seems to be the one man in the last 100 years that has gone and experienced the Bedouin culture, right?
Right.
So the peninsula, the whole. He's the only one that's gone there, understood it, and been able to express it to a Western audience to any degree. He had a little bit of help. Thomas was a great videographer at the time that made him famous, made him Lawrence of Arabia. But his books stands on its own, and books stand on their own. So Wells and I looked at each other and said, yeah, he's so now what do we do? Let's go. Well, I guess that might be what makes us other folks who read history. We want to go live it. I was lucky enough to get an invitation from the Riyadh chapter of YPO, Young Presidents Organization. I'd written a book, television show, hosted. They went here. So not a lot of authors showing up in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia in 2006, but I was one. And I guess I did a good job with the presentation because they said, cool, what else can we do for you? brave. And we said, well, Wells and I would like to retrace the steps of T.E. Lawrence and 7 Pillars of Wisdom from Jeddah, Saudi Arabia to Damascus. And they said, oh, well, how can we help? And so we set off from Jeddah, which obviously is important town that services back in Medina, etc. We met some people that turned out later to be very interesting and write about them in the book. But we went north to the fortress towns of Yenbo, Al-Wajna, made Aqaba, which is seen for the first time. So the revolt actually pulled off a victory against the Turks. Lawrence had some ability over the Wadi Rum and up through Jordan, Iraq, the Syrian border was quite interesting with a backpack. I'll tell you about that later. To Damascus, and then finally to a Crusader castle, which was deemed to be perhaps the favorite of Lawrence, Crux Chevalier. It's in Holmes. And still standing today, although it's in much better shape than we were there. Syrian civil war was starting to heat up at the time we're moving through. That added a little bit of heat to our adventure. Lawrence, his original thesis for Oxford University was the differences in French Crusader castles and the Levant Crusader castles. And he wrote that. He got highest numbers at Oxford. He was recruited by a guy named Hogarth at the Ashmolean to do archaeology in the area and then become a photographer. But that's what got him back. That's what got him to learn the languages, learn the cultures and the customs, and become probably the most valuable Western intelligence source during the First World War. And I argue for the next 100 years in the area. So it is a heck of a long way of answering your relatively short question. As I mentioned, I'm not a historian. I'm a storyteller in most history.
Yeah, and you do such an incredible job of it. I would like to first zoom out quite a bit, and so it's a basic question, and then we're going to get definitely into the weeds of all of this. And so the basic question is the most obvious question. What was the most significant thing you learned through that journey?
The most significant thing I learned through that journey was the depth and breadth of my ignorance. Western Pennsylvania. My family was Christian. Well, I attended church on a pretty regular basis. And I was one of the, believers of my way or the highway, right? There's Christianity. That's what I learned. I think I met one Jewish kid before I was 15 years old. Nice guy. But, had some weird customs around Easter. Christmas, quite the same way. Got 12 days. Well, that was it. I got to boarding school on the East Coast. Got to Metro New York. Started to meet people from other cultures. Started to travel. Wow. And all of it came in an archaeological site now, Magna al-Shayb on the northwest corner of Saudi Arabia, just south of the Jordanian border. And our guide, now we had guides in each country on that first trip, and they did not talk to each other because we did not want to get sold down the road. So, that was the degree of our preparation, but they were all named Ali. So Ali is going on about this archaeological dig. These people pass through. Like Abraham, Israel, Musa, not for nothing. Where are you getting your stories? Correct. Well, Musa is Moses. Abraham is Abraham. Hagar is Hagar. I'll give you that. Ezra, you say it's funny, but it's Ezra. These are all from the Old Testament. These are from And Wells at the time. Let's call our friend Andrew dead. And so I'm going to name 12 prophets. you tell me how many are in the Torah. We weren't 12 for 12. And we realized at that time that the stories and the prophets and the deserts and the mountains and all of these stories are common to all three of us. There are some slight differences, and of course, the slight religious differences are magnified and used to divide each of them. But the reality is, it is much more common than you think. And there you have the breath of my ignorance was laid there in chapter 5 of the book, if you count.
Yeah, and that's exact. I think it's so apt to what's going on today in the world. You know, we're always talking about, well, the Middle East is such a powder keg, and you've got the Israelis, and you've got the Arabs, and the Palestinians, and everybody's fighting for the land. And the conversation is always, well, this person was here first. And my argument was always, well, then how far do we go back? You know, and I think you brought it up perfectly when you said Bedouin. These are Bedouin tribes from the beginning of mankind's kind of traversing through the world. There were no borders. There were no cities. It was just a bunch of Bedouins walking around. And as we learned agriculture and created small towns that became cities, we put up walls and we made borders. And inevitably, human nature was to fight wars for those borders, which we're seeing now. And so that's why I think that this book is so important, because it tells that history, not from a this person's right or this person's right, but from a historical aspect, from someone who walked on that land, right? You walked through it. You were given a history lesson. We can sit and debate history in a classroom day in and day out, but if you're not leaving that classroom and stepping on the same rocks that the people thousands of years ago stepped on, you have no concept of what's really going on in those areas.
We call it sand between the toes.
Yes.
And yeah, it's the sand, it's the rocks, but it's the people, it's the food, it's the customs. And I think that T. Lawrence's understanding of that really smacked in the face of Sykes and Picot, who made the original agreement, the Paris Peace Conference at Versailles, where these lines in the sand were drawn by people, frankly, that had never been there.
Mm-hmm.
And you want 100 years of discord and discontent? That's a good way to start.
Absolutely. I also think that you admitting, coming from, and this isn't a negative term when I say ignorant towards it, but you're coming from a place of ignorance in that you didn't think that you had all the answers when you got there. You came as someone who wanted to be educated. So those preconceived notions are those implicit biases that you might have had being in the Christian church. You know, I talk about this all the time. This is why your story is so fascinating to me, because it does parallel mine in different aspects. I come from a small town, working class in Louisiana. Was in the church all the time because of my parents, and didn't really meet someone outside of my own religious beliefs until I left for the Army, until I had to be pushed into these areas and understanding, especially Arab culture, but also Jewish culture and how those two interact. So it's really fascinating seeing that coming from the other side. Would you say that you wanting to learn was the thing that helped you out the most in identifying these aspects of the culture?
For sure. I think I use the word curiosity. That implies a willingness to learn. That implies dropping your bias in favor of gathering more information. At the end of the day, you can come back to your bias if that's what you think to do. But, you learn more about, could other people have grown up on the other side of this debate? Is there a third facet to the prism that I don't even know about? And, the reality is, heck yes. I've also come to really get specific about Islam, Christianity, and Judaism as religions, Israelis, Saudis, and Americans as nationalities. I believe that there is there is Judaism, there is Israeli, and there is Zionism. Zionism is another non-religious belief that, I think the flip side of it is almost Bedouism, which, better to just go around this part of the world forever. This weekend I did a podcast with a man who was born in Jerusalem. He is Muslim. He was not able to get an Israeli passport because he is not Jewish. He is not able to visit Mecca because he was born in Israel. And has a Canadian passport. He's a poet. It's not
That
harming
would make you
anyone.
a poet, I would
Well,
think.
yeah. So it was a very poetic podcast and interview because this came from such an area of peace, but the incredible irony of being born in a particular place. That place is literally the name of the nation has changed during his lifetime. And that affects the passport that he can get and the places that he can go, whether it's religious or for his job or anything else. P.S. He lives in L.A.
That's a totally different culture to
Yeah,
get into.
it is. It is.
So I think one of the main aspects of this, because of the line of business that I'm in, which is as an entrepreneur who is trying to make intelligence analysis more accessible, and that's basically for security of travel. And the reason behind that is because I did travel a lot in uniform, but I traveled a lot outside of uniform doing some stuff for the United States government that made it to where I had to go as a civilian to some of these locations, which meant I paid my own way and got reimbursed after that. But I had to do all the travel myself, and I had to do the security portion myself and identify aspects of these regions where I'm going to need to be careful. How was that process for you?
And that's a great story, Karen. I do acknowledge that you mentioned that you were asked to do stuff.
Stuff. I know sometimes
And
I get very vague, but there's just some things that I can't really
right,
talk about.
as people that love me have said, Miles, sometimes you're very specifically vague, right? So, in doing stuff, Wells and I really wanted to understand the culture and the people. And so in order to do that, we felt we had to do a decent amount of security training. I'll give an example of what that was like. So the man that at the time had just retired from doing security for the royal family in Great Britain. He did the kids. And so he did our training, Sandhurst graduate, so forth. And he really put us through the ringer. As the threats, looking ahead, yourself out of harm's way. And what it allowed us to do was not be consumed by concern for our security. We were trained. And so we were able to absorb and enjoy the culture at a different level than if we would have been looking for it back. Yes, it helps to have a buddy that knows what thing as well. So and it's much. But that security training included walking around with a PLB. That's right. So that PLB was tied to a kidnap and ransom policy, which included extraction. So it was 15 months from the time the PLB was engaged to the time.
And so for those who are wondering, PLB, believe what you're talking about is personal location beacon. It's what we use for personnel recovery in the U.S. government, and with SEER training, which is survive, evade, resist, and escape. That's I didn't know this going in because we didn't talk about this kind of stuff. It's very fascinating to me that, and good on him for doing that, for telling you to carry one of these, because they are very important, especially to have it to where it doesn't look like, it looks inconspicuous. Because the first thing, and I'm sure he told you this, the first thing they're going to get when you get rolled up is take your phone, and that's gone, because that's a tracking device, and they know that.
Right. So we were traveling at a time where all of these things would just sort of be. I'm a tech guy, so we're on the cutting edge of that, but it's not as prevalent as it was today. Like, you can't do fine back in 2000. So we had PLBs. You can decide whether it's conspicuous and unconspicuous, because we were down to our shorts at certain checkpoints. And I'm a manly man, but a PLB does stick out in your shorts. So,
Sounds like it's got a dual use there, Miles.
it's like, like, what is this? It looks like an episode from Spinal Tap. But we also had B-GAN transmitter. And the reason for that is a satellite device that allows it to connect directly. And it looks like a laptop, but with no keyboard, right? So that come out, it's like, what is this? And the reason we did that was we would journal every day, take photographs, and we'd write about our observations. And we'd stick that in the cloud, and we would wipe every device out. So we wake up in the morning, and nothing, right? So there's this short window after dinner that we consolidate everything to get rid of it. But we traveled clean 24 hours, 20 of the 24 hours a day. That was important. We had a tough book, so that's kind of standard there for military employees. And then the last part of the kit that always interests everybody was this napkin-like, wafer thin solar energy, which we could unfold and power everything. But the amount of reflection when it's pulled out in a border, or if we're getting onto a aircraft. Lots of questions. There's two dudes with only a backpack, and the story was we're hiking 1,000 kilometers from Jeddah to Damascus, trekking, so that includes camel and horse and this person. And why are you here? Was a frequent question, and the answer would be, we want to understand. Okay, right. And the one question at the Syrian border, which was hilarious, was like, just when he was stamping, he wrote in Arabic, "I'm letting them through on the authority of Commander Hussein al-Bakr." Right. So that was CYA for him. He stamps it, and he goes, one more question. One more question. How many more are there? So just two today. And we walked on, but being allowed us to observe the things that you see in the book. Otherwise, I think it would have just been a shit show of overload.
Yeah, and it's like I'll just keep going back to this because it's so fascinating to me. On the first part, because it's what I train people when they come to me for information and training going to, let's say, missionaries going out to certain locations in Africa. These are some of the same things that I would provide for them and to help them. Well, number one really is understanding the culture, because the one thing that can really get you in trouble is doing something that you didn't know was opposed to their culture, because you're so inundated with the American culture that these certain, even a thumbs up could be mistaken as the middle finger to someone in some of these cultures. And so you're really putting that at the forefront of their minds, be very careful about that. Did you ever have any incidents of that nature where you did something culturally that you thought was just very mundane, but it was mistaken as something very flagrant towards another person?
Yes. This didn't quite come with our training because it goes to table manners. Over time, we got invited to much, much fancier tables and very fancy palaces. We were with some powerful people, especially ASI, but there was a meal that I recall in Wadi Rum, which is in a desert in Jordan, and one always eats with the right hand,
Okay.
and you're around a circular serving platter. You know, there's on the fire, there's rice, there's lamb, there's vegetables, you can go. And every man is kind of, right shoulder in, left hand literally behind him. And I don't remember whether it was Wells, for whatever reason, lost balance or were extra hungry, but the left hand came out. And the looks of horror, no, no, no. I think you know why.
Yes.
But in the Arab culture, there's not a lot of toilet paper. So the left hand is reserved for cleaning up, uh, mostly with a spray nozzle. But the right hand is preserved as your instrument at the table,
Yeah.
and the left just not appreciated by anybody else except table.
This is,
So,
and if anyone is thinking that, Miles is talking out of his ass here, this can't be true. It is absolutely true. This is the exact training that I've gone through on what not to do, especially in regards to eating. That's one of the main thing. And I think culturally, a lot of our culture comes from being around the dining table, meeting with every meeting, every big event has to deal with food and being with the people that you know and love around the table. The other is shaking hands. You don't use that left hand to do anything when greeting another person. And it all has to do to that. You'll see, I know I myself have seen empty water bottles all over the place in various bathrooms. And, it's just, to us, especially in uniform, we were just like, well, I guess Ali was in here and he left his water bottle, because that's the only ones who were using that as a form to clean up. Even though we had all the toilet paper you could ask for, it's part of the culture. It's very interesting. I love that story because it is a microcosm of how easily you can offend an entire culture, and you're having this high level meeting or this high level meal, and just the American way, put out both hands, take that left hand to do something, and you could have caused an international incident. And if there was, if you were some government official. So it is very important. Was there ever a moment where you feared, like, did it ever get to a point where you were on the cusp of getting rolled up, or you feared going at a checkpoint that this is the moment they're taking me in? I'm going to have to call the embassy or something at this point.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll, I'll tell you, our first checkpoint between Jordan and Saudi, was again, sun split. And guy on one side is going like, guy on the other side, meet us at noon. It's like 7 o'clock in the evening, right? You know, you ain't leaving. Um, because it was the first one, you always had your first. And I would rate it like as a 7, in the end, but it was a first, right? And we hadn't tried out our story yet, right? Just here to visit and understand. Does that work? So, so I didn't have, the heart rate on my wrist at the time like I do now. But my resting heart rate's in the 40s. I'm sure I was, 160 plus,
No
or
doubt
now,
about that.
right?
I've been
Which is
there.
something, yeah, there's something they look for, right? It's like, they're looking for a reaction. Um, Jordanian border, uh, in Syria, just south of Deraa. Um, I wouldn't call this a cultural mistake. Call it an idiotic mistake. Next to a sign, it says absolutely no photograph. Hey, well, um, he created a distraction immediately, and so, and we got the rest of the questioning with an AK. It's like, you know.
Yeah.
Now we had a theory about stuff because we kind of broke down what the fire. You can't race fire, and but there were always there was always tape on the magazines. There was red tape and there was green tape. They always had this theory, like the guys with the red tape are all it's all over the place. The guys with the green tape look like they had a round in the chamber, right? We never tested this out. But for us, it's got red tape. We're good. No, so that was pretty nuts. And there was the rumblings of one of several civil wars in Syria at the time, but we were like, yeah, we're going to Iran, we're going to Damascus, we're going to Somalia, and it's like, we're on the highway, and there's tanks doing left and right. And we, I think that sticking to your story and not betraying the least amount of nervousness or lack of confidence. At first, I had a hard time believing we were just two dudes out the walk in the Middle East. But we just stuck to it. We had our history, we had our training, and many of them knew of T.E. Lawrence. And so we would get over it that way. There was this Carl Lawrence, right? And so that, you know, and the last thing I'll add to that was by far the toughest and worst border crossing we experienced was the King Sam Bridge between Jordan and
Mm-hmm. That makes a
two,
ton of sense.
two Americans on the other side of the Jordan River for just short of a month in backpacks, walking over together with a busload of Palestinians to cross the King Hussein Bridge. Tell me again what you're doing here. What did you see in Saudi Arabia? We saw friends. You have friends in Saudi Arabia.
Now we do.
No, I just love the delicious irony of the question and the answers. Like, yeah, now do you have friends in Israel? Yet. Would you like to be our first? And so in a late chapter of the book, there is based on a true story, recounting of that interrogation. And as it turned out, it went really light on me. Like, all right, yeah, he looks good. You know, I like the hair, and he's a football player. So why don't you watch the soccer match and have Coca-Cola? This is great. Well, and getting it. No.
Yeah, that makes total sense with his background.
Exactly. And it comes, you know, we finally get through it. We finally get through it. And like, Wells is like, you know, it's pretty tough. Like, how was it for you? Like, well, they didn't have any ice cubes for my Coca-Cola, but yeah.
Well, I hope that was the worst thing that happened. No ice for the soda. You brought up an interesting point about telling your story and having an ironclad story, and in having to do some of the things that I've had to do. I've had the exact same experience of, this is your story, this is who you are, and this is what you're doing. And it's months of training in that. You know, it's not too different from my typical day-to-day life, but there are certain nuances I can't explain to the border crossing agent. And I really need to hone in on that. Did you guys do a lot of training? Well, I guess a two-part question. One, was there a lot of aspects to your story that you could not tell border agents or security people?
The irony was, it it just sounded too simple and too sincere to them, right?
Yes.
I mean, you know, they're like, no way. Like, you're here to see the people and learn the history. Like, you know, there's a civil war going on. Yeah, we didn't know when we left. So, you know, T.E. Lawrence following the path of 7 pillars. Here's the book. We each had a copy of the book. And here's where we are. And here's where we said, right? And just kept hammering away just that. So there wasn't anything. Oh, they're interested in, are you journalists? That kind of gets in a little different. You know, we get the question so often that it was clear that was red alert. Word. No, we're not journalists. It's like, you know, then why do you have a list? Yeah, you know, making notes. It's like, where are the notes? Like, oh, we haven't made any today. So I think going down the journalist route, as you say, would have been a bad freelance. So we just, you know, regular dudes here to experience and understand.
Were there any moments where you had to build trust?
Well,
We're talking about
absolutely.
the huge
Absolutely.
distrust, right? Don't trust
Right.
journalists. I don't trust Americans. I don't trust white people. I don't trust people who don't look like me. This is, you're inundated with that in this culture because of the tons of things that have been done to the people of the Middle East by those other cultures I spoke about.
Well, couple of points there. One to that end. So Wells and I had the theory that 9/11 was not an attack. It was a counterattack. This shit started 1,000 years ago, right? It's just the latest in that chapter. So there's that.
Okay.
And so it wasn't about, why did you do this to us? And we're here to find out. You know, it's a police investigation. It was just a ping pong ball going back and forth between, you know. We talk about building trust. So Wells has a superpower, which is a Obi-Wan Kenobi like, these are not the droids you're looking for. And I witnessed him. So he had a scabbard that was given to him. It could do some damage. And we're about to get on a plane. And it was just like a hop inside Jordan. No big deal, right? But it was very cool out there. Combined.
The, the Jambaya. Yeah, I've got one of those
Yeah,
as well.
yeah. So, guy looks at it, and well, like there said, that's my mistake. Everything be fine. You can let us pass. We got on the plane. That was that. We had somebody send the thing home after that. Yeah. Uh, Sticking to the story, even to the point of like, I meant no harm by this. It was a mistake. Someone gave it to me as a gift. It's very dear to me. You may not take it away. I promise to get it sent safely back to me, but I'm getting on this plane with this, and everything will be fine.
I think that's a fascinating story in how to interact day to day with people, right? I know we all see there's a lot of social media videos that propagate this drama between two people that escalate from something that's so small that could be easily fixed by oh, my apologies, I did not know about this aspect, and let's move on our separate ways, and forgive me for that, and we don't have to escalate this. There's a lot within the American culture where it's, no, this is my right to do this and have this, and I'm going to escalate this further, and it gets people into a lot of trouble.
I'm an American. Well, I have an interesting story if you have time for it.
Absolutely.
Later on in our relationship with, especially KSA, King Saudi Arabia, after we had finished our journey, many of the notes that ended up being the book were read by some of the staff with a man named pretty high, not named at that, but he, kind of the handful of people that are running KSA, the governor of Jeddah, responsible for Mecca and Medina at the time. And we worked for him on a contract basis, a short period, couple of years, 25, 30. And to make things easier, they arranged to get me a Kula, which is a citizenship card for Saudi Arabia. These don't come lightly. But it really sped things along. I needed, but I made a mistake by entering the country with the company, because of the line, and then leaving the country with my U.S. passport.
Mm-hmm.
Ding, 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 ding. So they hold the flight, go to Dubai or London or whatever. They hold the flight because they can. They interrogate me. I have this rule of like 90 minutes plus or minus, and this has happened in a couple of places, or like an interrogation of less than 90 minutes. Like, that's like table stakes. You go over 90. So we're approaching the 90th minute. There is an A300 sitting on the tarmac, either waiting for me to board it or not board it. They'll hold the whole thing for this. And it basically centers around, like, who are you? With you throwing down a U.S. passport, they don't match, they match. It's the same name, but you go in with one and out with another. That doesn't work. And they're getting, and this is Saudi, right? Not serious. There's a ingrained respect for Americans there. It's raincoat, golf ward, but they're also following the rules. Comma is not an easy thing to do. We're at 90 minutes, It's 2 a.m., which isn't so bad in Saudi Arabia. It's 2 a.m. I don't remember whether it's Ramadan or not. Can you eat or not? But, it's turning to the point where it's like, like spend the name of something. No, intended. So I went out on the phone. I got like, look, it's a comment. It came from this guy who we work with as one of the hairstyle. Even phones at that time when you called the number, you got the photo of the guy you were calling.
Yep.
Like, okay, I'm calling Prince K. You're going to explain to him why you're holding me up. The phone is ringing. We're on speakerphone. What do you want to do?
This is a scene from a movie.
Yeah, I was just like all in. I'm like all
Yeah.
in. I'm get out of here. I'm like, we're gonna have a date. Like I was, and the assistant shut it down. Here we go. It was a picture. Truth be told, it was the number of the chief of staff. I also know the state today, but as it turned out, that's yeah.
Little luck there. Sometimes
Like,
we just need a little luck when these things
like
pop up.
she is not explaining it, and there's another lesson about Saudi, and this is in G. Lawrence's 27 articles. Is deal with the CD man and call him that, and so people know that you're familiar with him, and it worked on that again.
Yeah, absolutely a great story. So that's one aspect you're leaving there. The last aspect I want to get to before we close this out is what was it like getting back to the United States? And I ask that from personal experience and the things that I have done in having issues coming back, because it's the same questions. What were you doing in these countries? What is going on there? Or were you able to cover that some other way?
Well, in the States, I think there's a universal belief that I'm pretty much nuts. So anything that I was doing might be a true story. It might not. So that wasn't so different. Organizing the thoughts in a way in which I could tell it began with actually signing a deal with a Broadway producer to create a play around our experience. And that's still in development a decade later.
Mm-hmm.
But that play had become very much Paris Peace Conference, 1919, T.D. Lawrence and Gertrude Bell and Faisal in a room, hotel. It's very interesting in that they were drawing the lines in the sand that ended up getting adopted and not working. But that's the way the play went from Broadway. And when October 7th, Wells and I said, like, there's one story in development out there, but we have a story that needs to be told. And so that's when we rushed the book. And like rushed, I mean, after 16 years, we were right. 16 years to do when you're thinking about it for a decade. So this is really what we would have loved to have said the day we came back. Here's the story.
Mm-hmm.
It just took that long to pull it together. We had the benefit of, we've often said, we can tell the story anytime we want because peace will not break out in the Middle East in our lifetime.
Right.
So it's going to be valuable at any time we're ready. And finally, last year, we were ready for a line in the sand to be out there.
And a line in the sand is the book Miles Spencer co-authored that through his journeys through Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Syria. I think it is in the culture that we are in right now that I discuss on our weekly podcast just deals with geopolitical stuff. We're in a culture of war at this point. We've got aggressive actors around the world that are seeing an opportunity to do things for whatever purpose. I think that your book and your journey is the story to tell right now, because it's not a story of here's how you fix everything, here's the solutions. There's something that I say a lot, and you can agree or disagree with this, is we attempt as Americans, including the U.S. military, to fix Middle Eastern problems with Western ideals. And you can't do that because they are completely opposed to each other. And so as these regime changes...
You sound like T.E. Lawrence 100
Oh,
years
yeah.
ago. Exactly.
And I absolutely believe that. I tell this story of my first time going to Afghanistan. I spent most of my time in Iraq. The one time I went to Afghanistan twice. One of the first time I went there was 2010 or 2011, so almost a year in to the war in Afghanistan. It was called the Forgotten War at that point. Not a lot was really going on before the Obama administration wanted to stop the war and did sort of the surge that was done with the Bush administration in Iraq. They used that in Afghanistan. But before I was able to go, I had to watch a video series by a colonel who was a historian, and he was a historian for Afghanistan. That's a loose term because it's the way he sees it. The way that's properly seen is that there really is no Afghanistan. There is no real borders. If you zoom into it, we learned that whether I was in the center of Afghanistan or along the borders in the Kunduz area of Afghanistan, the borders were very loose there, and the insurgency used that loose border to get in and out. But if you didn't understand that, then you weren't able to properly conduct missions that went there. But as I watched, and he did this entire history of Afghanistan and the failures of the British Empire, the Russian Federation, and now the United States, it was that point where I knew, it was 2010 or 2011, we're not getting out of here unscathed. We're not getting out of this war looking like we're victorious in it. No matter what this shows. Before bin Laden was killed in that capture-kill mission, I think I can say this publicly now, I did work on some of that while I was out there. So that was a win for the United States, but there was no plan in place to get out of there. And we saw that happen in 2021 when we tried to leave, and we left a lot of things behind. But it was that moment that I knew, 2010 or 2011, that we're not getting out of here unscathed. It's going to be a debacle when we try to get out of there. And it's because no one really understood the history, hundreds, thousands of years in this Bedouin culture in Afghanistan. I think that's where your book is really important right now. And I sincerely mean this, that everyone should go and look for the book, read it without preconceived notions, without your opinions. Just read it from a place of ignorance. I don't know anything about this area, even though I've been there and I think I know everything about the area. Read it from that perspective, and you may get a much clearer perspective on what's going on in the world, especially in the Middle East.
Couldn't ask for a higher endorsement. I appreciate that, Kurt.
No, I really appreciate you coming on and wanting to come on to this podcast and tell this story. I think the book I think it's really important. I think your journey is incredible, and I've said it multiple times. It really mirrors my journey, even you coming from, hardworking Pittsburgh family. It's small town Louisiana, but it's hardworking family, Christian background, and then going, not a lot of this makes sense, and I need to figure out. And through my journeys, trying to educate myself on different cultures and really how we're all different people, but we're not really that different. We want to trust each other, and we have simple needs. We need family, we need love, we need sustenance, and a roof over our heads, and barely the roof over the head because of Bedouin cultures. Just walk for days with a tent. But it's an incredible journey, and I really hope people read this and understand it, and that it leads to people wanting to do something good, not just take a side of, well, these people are wrong because of this, and these people are wrong because of this other thing. Maybe take those extremes, come to the middle, and understand that two things can be true at the same time. Two people can be wrong, and two people can be right in the same sentence, trying to find those compromises that we can all make to have a much more peaceful interaction with people. Thank you so much, Miles. Can you let everybody know where they can get the book and where they can find you if they wanted to get in touch with you, and especially if anybody wants to promote it as well.
Sure, we're all in on Amazon, so you can get the Kindle or the paperback or a wonderful Audible, which was narrated by Eduardo Ballerini. Look, we wrote the words, but when I hear him say them, it's much better. I'm a big fan of the Audible. I also run my day job from milespencer.com, so there's a bit about put a bit about the other things about Paul did there. From social standpoint, LinkedIn and X, Twitter seem to be my preferred. To reach out anywhere there, I'd be happy to help anybody wants to learn anything more about this or anything else I'm working on. Including, I might mention, Magnus and Finn are back for a second adventure coming up in the spring, which is based in Cuba.
Oh, wow.
Yet another colonial location that it's not gone well in the last 100 years, and it's called Havana Familia.
Wow, excellent. I'm looking forward to that. And once again, I just want to thank you for sitting here, taking an hour out of your day. For me, time is precious, so it makes me very happy that people would spend that time just to talk to me, a guy with very little credentials, and but a curious mind, and that's all. That's all I want people to know, is that just all curious minds trying to figure out what's going on in the world. And not everybody has the right answers, but if we come together and put all of those solutions in a box, we could probably pick out something that is perfect for us and for all generations.
Thanks so much, Karen.
Thank you.